Holy Gospel according to St. John, the first chapter. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him. Yet the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God, who were born not of blood or of the will of the flesh or of the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and lived among us. And we have seen his glory, the glory as of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. The Gospel of the Lord. In the beginning, not once upon a time, or back when the earth existed in its primal essence, not even a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, but in the beginning. With three simple words, John lifts us out of the land of fairy tale and philosophy and science fiction and takes us back to the time before time, before galaxies spun and stars were hung, before hydrogen and helium atoms began their miraculous collision course, even before Keith Richards. The James Webb Telescope gifts us every day with stunning images that tell the story of our unfolding, expanding cosmos. Cosmos, as in cosmetology, the art of making something beautiful. Now, since music is the beating heart of our worship, let's think of the cosmos this morning as a beautiful symphony. And John invites us to listen in, to hear how it all began. In the beginning. But can we hear it through all the static? Can we really wrap our minds around the birth of everything? Pastor and theologian and martyr Dietrich Bonhoeffer doesn't think we can. In thinking of the beginning, he says, thinking collapses. I like that word. You can almost hear the sound it describes. A building collapses with age. Scaffolding collapses under too much weight. A musical performance collapses when players lose the tempo or haven't learned the piece well enough. And then it's just noise. Nations collapse when pride and power rule, and when we play with the facts, even truth collapses. or so it seems. Headlines and Facebook news feeds and blustery podcasters tell us all about these big noises. Gaza, Ukraine, Sudan, the U.S. Congress, the warming of the earth and the rising of the oceans, all distortions in the symphony of the cosmos. Now, we can easily tune these out with the push of a remote or the click of a mouse, but not so easy to tune out are the everyday noises around us. You know, the neighbor's barking dog, or the driver who lays on his horn as he passes us, or the sharp rebuke of a parent or friend. All such noise is hard on our frail hearing, but we can't block it out. The cacophony out there, or in our neighborhoods, in our homes, in us. Sometimes it just seems like the notes in this symphony of the cosmos are just falling off the page, one by one. Or maybe the conductor has dropped the baton. But it's Christmas. So lighten up, Steve, and let's tune into that vibe. What's your earliest memory of Christmas? When were you first aware of what was going on? I was 3 years old, and I clearly remember coming out of my bedroom to the astonishing vision of a real Christmas tree with real snow on its decorated branches. Now, a 3-year-old isn't burdened by logic. So the fact that this tree was standing in the middle of our living room in San Antonio wasn't off-key to me at all. I loved it. To me, on that morning, that snow-piled tree was pure magic. Turns out it was shaving cream. Now, to our credit, my sisters and brothers and I were fooled only once by our father's magic trick. Well, I know I was fooled only once. And my sister still has the ornaments encrusted with petrified barbasol as an annual reminder of those times. I still wake up on some Christmas mornings longing for that same magical feeling. Maybe you do too. But that's a child's dream, right? We can't recapture the magic of Christmas's past. But we still set the stage for it. Every year, we wrap presents, trim the tree, prepare the meal, pour the Christmas cheer. We look forward to lively conversation. Maybe there will be a reunion, perhaps a new face at the table. Of all the 365 days in the year, we plan for this one to be harmonious. Of course, we know that for some it won't be. Those who have no one to be with and have no choice in the matter. All kinds of charitable causes, including the Christmas giving program here, help us to not forget them, to provide at least some of what those without a home, without a family, without good memories might otherwise miss. All those who have lost the melody of the season, or maybe never knew it. And some folks choose to spend Christmas by themselves. Maybe they've had enough of the entertaining and the busyness. They deserve a year off to let someone else do it. There's a quiet contentment in that. My wife suggests there's grace in there too. That way, she says, you eliminate the mashugana. Whatever awaits you at home when you leave here this morning, you can be sure of one thing: there will be collapses. The ham will be dry. Aunt Rachel forgot her dessert on the countertop. Joe, your nephew, has COVID and cancels out. Uncle Chester has a little too much cheer and causes a minor scene. Somebody will grouse about their present, and there will probably be breakage of toys or ornaments or dishes, maybe a hat trick. Now, we can manage these mishaps with enough patience and goodwill, but more disruptive will be what's going on inside of us today, the noise no one else can hear, the thoughts, the worries, the fears, the questions that have been playing in the echo chambers inside our heads for maybe a day or a week or a month or a year. They might even catch us by surprise, these intruding thoughts. An elderly grandparent gazes around the table and wonders how many Christmases he has left. A couple with their kids playing noisily in the other room looks at each other, both dreading their next visit with the counselor to talk about their fragile marriage. A mother is praying that her 8-year-old son, who's on the spectrum, won't become suddenly agitated by a look or a comment. A 30-something woman is thinking about mortgage payments. Maybe she and her partner were premature in buying a house last year. Another is nervous about hearing lab results from her doctor on Thursday. A teenager is stressing about school or a friend's poor decision or his identity. All of these are reminders of just how frail we really are. Maybe the best gift we can give each other this year is to know that every one of us will be carrying our own inside story today. And only you know what yours will be. Some false chord that may feel like nothing, or like the first tremor in a minor or major collapse. The prophet Isaiah has a different word for that: ruins. To the Jews in the 8th century before Christ, he says, "Break forth, shout for joy, you ruins of Jerusalem, for the Lord has comforted his people. He has redeemed Jerusalem." Strange words for a people in captivity, in collapse. Isaiah speaks a word of joy they don't feel, a word of redemption that's nowhere in sight. And yet they are the ones God spoke to long ago, as we heard earlier from Hebrews. Long ago, ancient history to us. But, it goes on, in these last days, God has spoken to us by a Son. In the gospel reading, John says, by a word, a logos, a logic. That's a fair interpretation of the Greek. And John says this Son, this word, this logos, this logic, who was with God in the beginning, who was God, became flesh and made his dwelling among us. In other words, in the Christ child, the divine has become human. Fairy tales and philosophy and science fiction all collapse here. Because if we can't begin to conceive of the beginning of all things, then we are completely undone by this strange logic that the creator of all things would, out of love's pure impulse, choose to become one among the rest of us in this symphony of the cosmos that has fallen into jarring disharmony. And it's even stranger logic, God's nonsense, that by this child's birth, by his rising and by his dying and by his rising, the dissonance of the world is hushed. The baton has not been dropped. The truth has not collapsed. Jesus has come full of grace and truth. The gift of the divine to all, for all. That's the promise given to the prophets long ago. It's the promise fulfilled in these last days. Promise of harmony and restoration. But we aren't patient when it comes to this promise. And why should we be? All around us, the clanging and the clashing continue. Nations fight and rise and fall. The earth is warming and the oceans are getting higher. We still harm others by what we say and what we do, and are harmed by them. Where's the evidence of this supposed harmony? Where's the proof of this redemption you Christians are always talking about? We need proof. We want our magic trick. But those work only once. This promise is unfolding, expanding. The Word made flesh is dwelling among us. Or as Pastor Eugene Peterson paraphrases it, Jesus Christ has moved into the neighborhood. He is Emmanuel, God with us, in our homes and around our tables, in this place, in this table. Thinking about that, using our brains only, will end in collapse. So we listen instead for the faintest notes of this song of love unknown as they weave their way through the distortion out there, through the static in our own echo chambers, with its message that all will be well. We listen for it in the voices of those who tell it on the mountain, who speak of peace and work for justice, and who wait patiently for the day when all God's people will be one. We listen because this is not the day for making sense. We are not trying to recapture the past. We're celebrating the birth of Jesus, the unifying score of the universe, the beginning of the end of collapse. Amen.